Ambassador Kethara had served the Galactic Council for over 2 centuries, witnessing the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. Her species, the Veltani, were known throughout the galaxy for their diplomatic skills and unshakable composure. In all her years, she had never seen the council chamber descend into such chaos. It started as a routine session. The humans, relatively new members who had joined the galactic community only 50 years ago, had submitted a formal request to update their planetary designation in the official records. A simple administrative matter, really. Their representative, a calm woman named Director Sarah Chen, stood at the central podium with what appeared to be standard documentation. Honored Council, Director Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber's translation systems. We appreciate the designation, Terra 3847, that was assigned to our world upon first contact. However, we would like to register our planet's actual name in your permanent records. Kethara barely paid attention initially. Species often preferred their native names for their homeworlds, rather than the numerical designations the Council used for cataloging. It was a common enough request that usually passed without debate. The true name of our world, Director Chen continued, is Earth. But in our oldest languages, it was known by another name that we believe predates even our recorded history. The chamber buzzed with mild interest. Several council members were already preparing to approve the simple nomenclature change. Kethara was reviewing her schedule for the next session when Director Chen spoke again. Our planet's ancient name, still used in some of our oldest surviving texts and ceremonies, is Deathworld Prime. The translation systems fell silent for a moment, processing the unfamiliar term. Then the chamber erupted. High Counselor Zarthek, a towering representative of the militant Krex Dominion, knocked over his ceremonial staff as he shot to his feet. His scales had shifted to the deep purple that indicated extreme agitation among his people. Impossible, he roared, his voice cutting through the sudden din. That designation was classified at the highest levels. The elegant Solari delegate, Whisper of Distant Stars, had gone completely still. Her crystalline form, usually shimmering with gentle blues and greens, had turned an ominous shade of red that her species displayed only in the presence of mortal danger. The humans are from there, she whispered, her voice carrying despite its softness. Across the chamber, Kethara watched in fascination as representatives from dozens of species began displaying signs of distress. The Quantum Collective's representative, usually just a shifting cloud of particles, had condensed into a tight, defensive sphere. The proud hegemony delegates were backing toward the exits, their usual arrogance replaced by something that looked remarkably like terror. Director Chen remained at the podium, looking genuinely confused by the reaction. I'm sorry, but I don't understand the concern. Is there already a planet with this designation in your records? The question sent another wave of panic through the chamber. High Counselor Zarthek was frantically activating emergency communication protocols, his claws clicking rapidly across holographic interfaces. Security. Lock down this chamber immediately. No information leaves this room. With respect, Director Chen said, her voice taking on a harder edge. We are sovereign members of this council. You cannot restrict our communications without cause. The statement seemed to make things worse. Elder Morvix of the Ancient Ones, a being so old that most species considered his race mythical, slowly turned his massive head toward the human delegation. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of eons. Cause? He rumbled, his words causing the chamber's acoustic systems to vibrate. Child of the Death World, you stand here breathing our air, thinking our thoughts, sharing our space. That alone is cause for 1,000 species to flee to the galaxy's edge. Kethara found herself leaning forward despite her diplomatic training. In all her years of service, she had never seen Elder Morvix display anything other than calm wisdom. Now, she could see something in his ancient eyes that she had never expected to witness. Fear. Director Chen looked between the panicking delegates with growing concern. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Our planet is called Earth. Yes, some ancient texts refer to it as Deathworld Prime. But that's just an old name. Perhaps you're thinking of somewhere else? Show us your stellar coordinates, demanded High Counselor Zarthek. Immediately. I'm not sure why this is relevant to a simple naming registry, but very well. Director Chen activated her portable display, projecting a three-dimensional star map showing Earth's location relative to the galactic center. The moment the coordinates appeared, the chamber fell into a deathly silence. Even the background hum of the life support system seemed to quiet. Kethara felt her own breathing slow as she stared at the display. The coordinates matched perfectly with the most classified location in the Council's databases. The location that had been marked with warnings in every major galactic language. The location that entire fleets were ordered to avoid at all costs. Elder Morvix rose from his massive chair. A process that took several long moments and caused the floor to vibrate. His species rarely stood for anything other than matters of galactic importance. Council members, he said, his voice carrying an authority that had guided galactic civilization for millennia. We are in the presence of the Death World's children. Director Chen was beginning to look genuinely concerned now. I really think there's been some mistake. Our planet isn't particularly dangerous. Yes, we have some challenging weather and wildlife, but nothing that would warrant this kind of reaction. The statement caused High Counselor Zarthek to laugh bitterly. Not particularly dangerous? Your world is the subject of our most terrifying legends. It's the place we tell our children about to make them behave. That's impossible, Director Chen said, but her confidence was clearly shaken. We're just a normal species from a normal planet. We've been cooperative members of this council for 50 years. Whisper of Distant Stars finally spoke again. Her crystalline voice carrying a musical quality that barely concealed her terror. Normal? You call yourself normal? Her form shifted to deeper shades of red. Your species survived in an environment that our greatest scientists declared impossible for intelligent life. Your world was classified as uninhabitable not because it lacks resources, but because it has too many ways to kill anything that tries to live there. Kethara accessed her personal database, pulling up the classified files she had clearance to review. The information she found made her question her own diplomatic composure for the first time in decades. Deathworld Prime was indeed in the Council's records, but buried under so many security classifications that she had never seen the files before. The planet was listed as having gravity levels that would crush most species. Atmospheric composition that was toxic to 90% of known life forms. Weather patterns violent enough to level cities. Geological instability that could split continents. And most terrifying of all, an ecosystem so aggressively competitive that every native life form was essentially a biological weapon. But worse than the environmental data were the theoretical analyses. Council scientists had run projections on what kind of species could evolve in such conditions. The results had been so disturbing that the files were immediately classified. Any species that survived such a world wouldn't just be hardy, they would be living weapons themselves. Director Chen was reading something on her personal device, her face growing pale. I'm receiving urgent communications from our homeworld. Apparently, our scientists are just now accessing some very old archaeological sites that were previously off-limits. They're finding things that don't match our understanding of our own history. The human delegation was now huddled together, speaking in rapid, urgent whispers. Kethara could see other council members slowly backing away from them, as if the humans had suddenly become radioactive. What kind of things? Elder Morvix asked, his massive form looming over the chamber. Director Chen's hands were shaking slightly as she read from her device. Weapons technology that predates our recorded civilization by millions of years. Military installations built to withstand planetary bombardment. And genetic modification laboratories that appear to have been working on biological warfare on a scale we didn't think was possible. The chamber erupted again, but this time the panic was different. More organized, more purposeful. Kethara could see species representatives activating emergency protocols, preparing to evacuate not just the chamber, but likely their entire diplomatic missions. High Counselor Zarthek was shouting orders into multiple communication devices. Alert all border fleets, increase patrols on all approaches to Council space, and someone get me a direct line to the Intelligence Division. We need to know everything about human military capabilities. And we need to know it now. Wait, Director Chen called out, her diplomatic training finally reasserting itself. Whatever you think you know about our world, we are the same species that has worked peacefully alongside you for 50 years. We have honored every treaty, contributed to joint scientific endeavors, and posed no threat to anyone. The statement gave some of the panicking delegates pause, but Elder Morvix shook his massive head slowly. That, child of the death world, may be the most terrifying thing of all. Kethara found herself speaking before she realized it. What do you mean, Elder? The ancient being turned his gaze toward her, and she felt the weight of eons in his stare. For 50 years, we have shared our space, our technology, our knowledge, with the children of the most dangerous world in the galaxy. We have taught them our weaknesses, shown them our defenses, trusted them with our most sensitive information. The implication hit the chamber like a physical blow. If humans were indeed from a world that had shaped them into natural-born weapons, then 50 years of peaceful cooperation hadn't been friendship, it had been reconnaissance. Director Chen was frantically working her communication device, her calm, diplomatic facade finally cracking. This is impossible. Our people would never. We're not monsters. We're explorers, scientists, artists. We came to the galaxy, seeking knowledge and friendship. Perhaps, Elder Morvix said gravely. But your world didn't shape you for exploration and friendship. It shaped you for survival at any cost. The question that now faces this council is whether your peaceful nature is genuine evolution, or simply the ultimate camouflage. The chamber was now in full evacuation mode. Species representatives were activating emergency transportation, preparing to flee back to their homeworlds with news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. But as Kethara watched the human delegation standing alone at the center of the chamber, she found herself wondering something different. If humans were truly the product of the legendary Deathworld Prime, and if they had indeed spent 50 years quietly integrating into galactic society while keeping their true nature hidden, then the galaxy had just made a discovery that would change everything. The question wasn't just what humans were capable of, it was whether the galaxy would survive finding out. Director Chen's communication device chimed with an urgent message. She read it quickly, her face growing even paler. Then she looked up at the rapidly emptying chamber and spoke in a voice that somehow carried clearly despite the chaos. My government wants me to inform you that they've just unsealed a vault that was buried beneath our capital city. They say the contents explain everything about our world's real history. And they say, she paused, swallowing hard, they say that learning the truth about Deathworld Prime is going to be just the beginning. As the last of the council members fled the chamber, leaving only the human delegation standing in the vast empty space, Kethara realized that the galaxy was about to discover that their worst nightmares had been living among them for 50 years. And somehow, she suspected, the real terror was just beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened exactly 72 hours after the initial revelation. The chamber looked vastly different now, where once hundreds of delegates from across the galaxy had gathered. Now only a dozen species remained. Even those who had chosen to stay had positioned themselves as far from the human delegation as physically possible. High Counselor Zarthek had aged visibly in the past 3 days. His scales, once a proud bronze, had dulled to a nervous gray. He called the session to order with none of his usual ceremonial flourish. We are here, he announced, to review evidence that has fundamentally challenged our understanding of galactic history. Director Chen, your government promised revelations that would explain the significance of your world's designation. The Council is prepared to hear these explanations. Director Chen stepped forward, but she looked like a different person than the confident diplomat from 3 days ago. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept since the discovery. In her hands, she carried a data crystal that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Before I present our findings, she began, I need you to understand that my own government is still reeling from these discoveries. What we've learned about our world's history challenges everything we thought we knew about ourselves. Elder Morvix, who had remained in the chamber despite his obvious fear, leaned forward in his massive chair. Show us what you found, child of the death world. Director Chen activated the data crystal, and the chamber filled with holographic displays showing archaeological sites across Earth. But these weren't the peaceful ruins of ancient civilizations that most species left behind. These were massive military installations carved deep into bedrock, weapons testing facilities that could be seen from orbit, and genetic laboratories that stretched for miles underground. The vault beneath our capital was just the beginning, Director Chen explained. In the past 72 hours, we've located and opened 17 similar facilities across our world. Each one contains records dating back millions of years, documenting what can only be described as a planetary military-industrial complex of unprecedented scale. 1. The holographic display shifted to show weapon schematics. Kethara felt her diplomatic composure slip as she studied the designs. These weren't just weapons, they were engines of planetary destruction, devices that could crack continents, alter atmospheric composition, or redirect stellar energy. According to the records, Director Chen continued, her voice growing quieter, our planet wasn't always called Earth. The name Deathworld Prime was earned through conflict, a war that lasted for millions of years, fought not just on our world's surface, but across multiple star systems. High Counselor Zarthek's claws scraped against his ceremonial table. A war? With whom? The holographic display changed again, showing star charts that made several council members recoil. The charts depicted battle lines stretching across entire galactic arms, with Earth Deathworld Prime at the center of a conflict that had apparently consumed thousands of worlds. We're still translating the records, Director Chen said. But the evidence suggests our ancestors fought against something called the Void Collective, an entity or entities that were described as devourers of worlds and enders of life. The conflict wasn't just for territory or resources. According to these documents, it was a war for the right of biological life to exist in the universe. Elder Morvix's massive form had gone completely still. When he spoke, his voice carried a resonance that made the chamber's walls vibrate. The Void War. We thought it was legend. Mythology created to explain the gaps in our galactic history. Apparently not, Director Chen replied. The records indicate that Earth's ecosystem wasn't naturally harsh. It was deliberately modified. Our ancestors essentially weaponized their own planet, creating an environment so deadly that it would forge any survivors into the ultimate warriors. They needed soldiers who could survive anything, fight anywhere, and never surrender. The chamber fell silent except for the nervous clicking of claws and the whisper of scales against fabric. Kethara was frantically accessing her own species' historical databases, searching for any reference to the Void War. What she found made her question everything she thought she knew about galactic history. Deep in the Veltani archives, buried under classifications she didn't even know existed, were fragments of records from their oldest settlements, references to a time of silence when entire star systems simply vanished without explanation, warnings about the places where light goes to die. And most chilling of all, prayers of gratitude to the warriors of the burning world, who had held the line against the infinite hunger. Director Chen, Kethara found herself saying, these records you've found, do they indicate what happened to this Void Collective? Why the war ended? Director Chen's expression grew even more troubled. That's where the records become difficult to interpret. The final entries suggest that the war didn't exactly end. It was paused. The Void Collective was forced into what the documents call the deep sleep, but the process required enormous sacrifice. The holographic display shifted once more, showing what appeared to be Earth itself, but changed. Massive installations covered the planet's surface, connected by energy conduits that formed geometric patterns across continents. The entire world had been converted into some kind of enormous machine. Our ancestors turned Earth into a containment facility, Director Chen explained. The Void Collective wasn't destroyed, it was imprisoned. And according to these records, maintaining that prison required the complete militarization of our species. Every human was born to be a soldier, every generation trained from birth to maintain the watch. High Counselor Zarthek's voice cracked as he spoke. And now? What is the status of this prison? Director Chen was silent for a long moment, consulting her communication device. Finally, she looked up with an expression that sent chills through every being in the chamber. Unknown. The final facility we opened contained what appears to be a countdown sequence. It's been running for the past 1,000,000 years, and according to our scientists, she paused, swallowing hard. It reaches 0 in approximately 3 galactic standard months. The implications hit the chamber like a physical force. Elder Morvix slowly rose from his chair, the process making the entire structure groan under his weight. "Council members," he said, his ancient voice carrying the weight of eons, "we now understand why the humans appeared to us as peaceful explorers 50 years ago. They weren't seeking friendship or knowledge. They were conducting reconnaissance, preparing for what's to come." Director Chen shook her head frantically. "No, that's not—" Silence. Elder Morvix's voice boomed through the chamber. "For millions of years, your species has maintained their vigil alone. They have carried the burden of protecting all biological life in the galaxy, without any of us even knowing the threat existed. And now, as that burden comes to an end, they reached out to the galaxy." Kethara felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place in her mind. "They weren't scouting our weaknesses," she said slowly. "They were evaluating our capabilities, trying to determine if the rest of the galaxy had developed enough to help them fight. One. Director Chen nodded reluctantly. "According to the final messages in the vaults, our ancestors believed that maintaining the prison indefinitely was impossible. They built the system to last as long as possible, but they always knew that eventually, the next generation would need allies. They sent us out to find help." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices as representatives began shouting questions and demands. How long had humans known? What exactly was the Void Collective? What would happen when the countdown reached 0? High Counselor Zarthek pounded his ceremonial staff, trying to restore order. "Director Chen, your people have hidden the truth from us for 50 years. How can we trust anything you tell us now?" "Because," Director Chen replied, her voice cutting through the chaos, "we didn't know the truth ourselves until 3 days ago. Our own leadership has been operating on instinct and genetic memory. The knowledge of our real purpose was locked away so deeply that it took your reaction to our planet's name to trigger the unsealing protocols." She gestured to the holographic displays surrounding them. "Everything you see here was hidden from us. We've spent 50 years building relationships with your species, not because we were following some ancient plan, but because we genuinely wanted to belong to something larger than ourselves. We were as surprised as you were to learn the truth." Elder Morvix had remained standing throughout the chaos, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. "Perhaps that is the most remarkable thing of all. Your ancestors created the perfect warriors, capable of fighting the greatest threat the galaxy has ever known. But they also ensured that when the time came to reach out for help, their descendants would approach us with open hands rather than closed fists." The chamber gradually quieted as the implications of Elder Morvix's words sank in. The humans hadn't infiltrated galactic society as conquerors or spies. They had arrived as refugees from a burden too great for any species to bear alone. Director Chen activated her communication device and spoke into it quietly. After a moment, she looked back up at the assembled council members. "I've just received authorization from our government to share our complete historical databases with the council. Everything we've discovered, all our technological specifications, and our best estimates of what we'll be facing when the countdown ends. But there's something else you need to know." The holographic display changed one final time, showing Earth as it appeared now, a blue and green world that looked nothing like the militarized fortress depicted in the ancient records. "Our world has been changing," Director Chen explained. "For the past 1,000 years, the military installations have been powering down. The genetic modifications that made our environment so deadly have been reversing. Our planet has been slowly returning to its natural state, becoming the world you encountered when you first made contact with us." Kethara understood the implications immediately. The countdown isn't just marking the end of the prison. It's marking the end of your species' ability to maintain it. Director Chen nodded grimly. Our ancestors built Earth to be a forge for warriors, but they also built it to eventually become a home for people who might never need to fight. They hoped that by the time the system failed, they would have found allies among the stars, partners who could help face whatever emerges from the deep sleep. The chamber fell into a heavy silence. Every being present was grappling with the same realization. The peaceful humans they had known for 50 years were the descendants of the greatest military force in galactic history, and in 3 months, they were all going to find out why such a force had been necessary. High Counselor Zarthek finally broke the silence. Director Chen, what exactly does your government propose we do with this information? Director Chen looked around the chamber at the handful of species representatives who had chosen to remain. Her expression was grave but determined. We propose that the galaxy finally learns the truth about the Void Collective. We propose that you understand what we may be facing when the countdown ends. And we propose that, for the first time in millions of years, the children of Deathworld Prime don't have to stand guard alone. As the session concluded, and delegates began preparing to carry this revelation back to their homeworlds, Kethara realized that the galaxy was about to face its greatest test. The question was no longer whether they could trust the humans. The question was whether humanity could trust the galaxy to stand with them when the real nightmare began. 6 weeks after the revelation, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. What had begun as panic had evolved into the largest cooperative effort in recorded galactic history. The council chamber, once a place of careful diplomatic protocol, now buzzed with constant activity as representatives from over 300 species worked around the clock. Admiral Sarah Chen, she had been promoted from director upon returning to Earth, stood before the massive tactical display that now dominated the chamber's center. The holographic projection showed defensive positions across 17 star systems, with Earth at the center of a complex web of technological and military preparations. Status report from the Hegemony Fleet? She requested, her voice carrying an authority that hadn't been there 2 months ago. The transformation in her demeanor was remarkable. Where once stood a careful diplomat, now stood someone who looked like she had been born for command. Commander Valthar of the Hegemony stepped forward, his proud bearing now mixed with something that looked remarkably like respect. All 700 vessels have completed the human modifications. Admiral, I must admit, your species' approach to defensive systems is innovative. That was an understatement, and everyone in the chamber knew it. When the humans had shared their complete military databases, the technological revelations had been staggering. Weapons that could function in zero-point energy fields, shields that grew stronger under attack, ships that could repair themselves using raw stellar material. But most shocking of all had been the humans' approach to cooperation. Where most species designed their technology to exclude others, human systems seemed built from the ground up for integration. Their weapons worked better when operated by multiple species. Their ships functioned optimally with diverse crews. Their strategies assumed cooperation rather than competition. Elder Morvix, who had relocated his entire massive form to the chamber for the duration of the crisis, rumbled his approval. The Veltani integration teams report similar success. Admiral, it appears your ancestors designed their technology not just for war, but for the war they knew their descendants might have to fight alongside strangers. Kethara looked up from her coordination station, where she had been managing communications between 47 different species military commands. The past weeks had been the most intense of her career, but also the most inspiring. She had watched ancient enemies set aside millennia of conflict to face a common threat. She had seen species that had never before shared technology willingly opening their most classified databases. Admiral, she reported, the Quantum Collective has finished their analysis of the Void Collective fragments from the Earth vaults. They're requesting a private briefing. Admiral Chen nodded. Put them through to the secure channel. A shimmering field of particles materialized near the tactical display, the Quantum Collective's preferred method of communication for serious matters. When they spoke, their voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Admiral Chen, our analysis of the Void Collective remnants has revealed disturbing information. The entity you imprisoned was not merely a species seeking conquest. It was something far worse, a force that consumed not just matter and energy, but the fundamental information that makes life possible. The chamber grew quiet. Even with all their preparations, many had hoped that the Void Collective might be something they could negotiate with, reason with, or at least understand. It appears, the Quantum Collective continued, that biological life itself is antithetical to the Void Collective's existence, not because of competition, but because life creates what they cannot: growth, change, unpredictability. We are literally impossible for them to comprehend, and thus they view us as a fundamental error that must be corrected. High Counselor Zarthek, who had become Admiral Chen's closest non-human ally in the preparation efforts, scraped his claws nervously. Can we still contain them when they awaken? Admiral Chen studied the tactical displays surrounding them. The past weeks had seen unprecedented cooperation, but also devastating honesty about their capabilities. Even with the combined might of the galaxy's greatest civilizations, their chances of containing the Void Collective were not good. The original containment system relied on Earth's unique properties, she said finally. Our world was converted into a massive energy sink, constantly draining power from the Void Collective to keep them dormant. But that system was always meant to be temporary. She manipulated the tactical display, showing new projections that made several council members step back in alarm. Based on our analysis of the ancient records, when the countdown reaches 0, the Void Collective won't just wake up. They'll emerge with all the energy that's been contained for the past million years. They'll be stronger than they were when our ancestors first fought them. The implications were staggering. 1,000,000 years of accumulated power, released all at once, wielded by entities that viewed biological life as an aberration to be eliminated. But Admiral Chen wasn't finished. However, there is something our ancestors never had. She gestured toward the assembled representatives. They fought alone, using only human resources and human perspectives. We have the combined knowledge, technology, and strategic thinking of hundreds of species. She activated a new section of the display, showing battle plans that incorporated technologies and tactics from across the galaxy. The Kreks provide unmatched offensive capabilities. The Veltani offer diplomatic and coordination expertise. The Solari contribute their mastery of energy manipulation. The Quantum Collective brings computational power beyond anything our ancestors could imagine. As she spoke, representatives from dozens of other species nodded, each recognizing their contribution to what was becoming less of a defense and more of a statement. The galaxy would not go quietly into extinction. But most importantly, Admiral Chen continued, we have something the Void Collective has never encountered before. Genuine cooperation. Our ancestors fought to preserve life. We're fighting to prove that life deserves to continue evolving, growing, and becoming something greater than the sum of its parts. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Admiral Chen activated her communication device, listened for a moment, then looked up with an expression that somehow managed to be both grim and satisfied. The countdown has accelerated, she announced. Our monitoring stations around Earth indicate the awakening will begin in approximately 6 hours. The chamber erupted in controlled chaos as species representatives activated emergency protocols and began coordinating with their respective fleets. But beneath the urgency, there was something else, a sense of purpose that transcended species boundaries. Elder Morvix slowly rose from his position, the ancient ritual demanding attention. Admiral Chen, before we face what is to come, there is something the Council must formally acknowledge. The chamber gradually quieted as the massive being spoke with the authority of eons. For millions of years, your species bore the burden of protecting all biological life in the galaxy. You did so without recognition, without assistance, and without thanks. The Council formally recognizes the debt we all owe to the children of Deathworld Prime. Admiral Chen shook her head. Elder Morvix, with respect, we didn't take on that burden for recognition. Our ancestors did what needed to be done because someone had to do it. Perhaps, Elder Morvix replied, but now you will not stand alone. The galaxy stands with Earth. The next few hours passed in a blur of final preparations. Fleets moved into position around Earth, not to defend a single world, but to protect what that world represented. Communication networks linked hundreds of species in real-time coordination. Weapon systems that had never been designed to work together were integrated into unified defensive grids. When the countdown finally reached 0, the change was immediately visible across multiple star systems. The energy signature emanating from Earth shifted dramatically as ancient containment systems powered down for the first time in a million years. Admiral Chen stood at the center of the council chamber, now converted into a combat command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing readings from across the galaxy. All stations, report status. Krex battle fleet reports ready. Veltani coordination networks are online. Solari energy manipulation systems are charging. Quantum collective computational matrices are synchronized. One by one, over 300 species confirmed their readiness. As the reports came in, Admiral Chen felt something her ancestors had never experienced. During their long vigil, she was not alone. The first sign of the Void Collective's awakening was subtle, a darkening of space itself around Earth, as if light were being absorbed rather than reflected. Then the darkness began to spread, reaching out like tendrils toward the defensive positions. Contact, reported the sensor operator. Multiple entities emerging from the containment zone. Energy signatures are unprecedented. On the tactical display, shapes began to appear that defied conventional understanding. They weren't ships or creatures in any recognizable sense, but rather distortions in space-time itself, areas where the normal laws of physics seemed to simply stop working. Admiral Chen activated the fleet-wide communication system. All vessels, this is Admiral Chen. Today we face an enemy that views our very existence as an error. They believe that biological life is a mistake that must be corrected. But we are here to prove them wrong. She looked around the chamber at the representatives from hundreds of worlds, all working together with a coordination that would have been impossible just weeks ago. Our ancestors gave us the tools to fight. You have given us the strength to win. All fleets, engage the enemy. What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. The Void Collective attacked not with weapons, but with alterations to reality itself, attempting to rewrite the fundamental laws that allowed biological life to exist. But for every change they made, the combined fleets adapted with a flexibility that seemed to genuinely surprise the ancient entities. Human weapons that had been designed for integration allowed other species to contribute capabilities the original designers had never imagined. Krex aggression channeled through Veltani coordination networks. Solari energy mastery amplified by quantum collective calculations. Technologies that should have been incompatible working together in ways that created something greater than their individual capabilities. The battle raged across 17 star systems, but gradually, impossibly, the combined galactic forces began to gain ground. The Void Collective, for all their accumulated power, seemed unable to adapt to the concept of truly cooperative resistance. Admiral Chen watched the tactical displays with growing amazement, as species after species contributed solutions to problems that had stymied her ancestors for millions of years. The galaxy wasn't just defending itself. It was proving that biological life had evolved beyond anything the Void Collective could comprehend. When the final Void Collective entity retreated into deep space, abandoning its attempt to reclaim the galaxy, the silence in the command center was profound. Then, slowly, representatives from hundreds of species began to cheer, creating a sound unlike anything the chamber had ever heard. Admiral Chen activated the fleet-wide communication system one final time. All vessels. This is Admiral Chen. The immediate threat has passed. The galaxy is secure. But as she looked around the chamber at beings from across the galaxy who had come together to face extinction, she realized something profound had changed. The galaxy would never again be a collection of separate species, pursuing individual interests. Elder Morvix's ancient voice carried clearly through the celebration. Admiral Chen, it appears your ancestors' greatest victory was not defeating the Void Collective, but ensuring that when they returned, the galaxy would be ready to stand as one. Admiral Chen smiled, feeling the weight of millions of years of solitary vigilance finally lifting from her species' shoulders. Elder Morvix, I think they would have been proud to see what biological life has become. As the celebration continued around them, Reports began coming in from across the galaxy. Species that had maintained barriers for thousands of years were opening their borders. Technologies that had been closely guarded secrets were being shared freely. The Void Collective's greatest mistake had been forcing the galaxy to discover what it could accomplish when biological life chose cooperation over competition. The children of Deathworld Prime were no longer alone, and the galaxy was stronger for it.